wel plaatsnemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hereby open this academic session during which Professor Dick van Engelen will give his inaugural address. And this occasion, therefore, is the celebration of the appointment of Professor Dick van Engelen as Professor of Intellectual Property, Litigation and Transaction Practice at this university. Mr. van Engelen, can I invite you to give your inaugural address?
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. It's been a long travel journey here to Maastricht. And I'd like to take you on another journey, but after that there will be bitterballen, so hang in there. From Einstein's relativity to a unified patent law. Einstein was person of the century, according to Time magazine for last century. And you might wonder, on your way over here, what does Einstein have to do with patents? You might say a lot, very little, and something. A lot because he was one of the great inventors of last century. In 1905, he had his miracle year, as they call it, in which he sort of exploded with 4 articles that sort of shook the world of physics. And the subjects he covered were that light consists of particles or photons, for which he got the Nobel Prize in 1921. He explained the phenomenon of Brownian motion. If you drop pollen on a surface of water, the red dots here, they start moving around. And he explained that in effect they are kicked around by the blue water molecules, thereby coming up with evidence of the existence of atoms and molecules. He published, of course, on the relativity of time. We will get into that later. And his famous equation E equals mc squared. And a small amount of matter may thus contain a large amount of energy. C, the speed of light, is 300,000 kilometers per second. Yeah, Max Verstappen can't achieve that. So in 1905, when he did this, he was a 26-year-old patent examiner working at the patent office in Switzerland in Bern. Now, as patent lawyers, we of course love to take the opportunity to claim that we contributed to all these inventions by Einstein because he worked at the patent office. And if we can prove that, then the purpose of patent law and its right to existence is very well founded. So let's see whether we can construe that. But I must say, don't keep your hopes too high. Patents are children of their time. And in those days, there were a lot of patents on light. This is Edison's light bulb from 1880. Patents on light, how to make it, how does it behave, and all of that. At the same time, there were a lot of patents on objects moving at high speeds, trains, locomotives. And because of the railway system, there were also a lot of patents on time synchronization. Before the railroads, you didn't really need to bother that much what the time was in the next town, but with the railroads, that became very critical. So there were a lot of patents being filed on that subject as well. Now, in those days, the laws of physics as developed by Newton ruled, and those were absolute, if you will. The speed of light is absolute. It's 300,000 kilometers per second, irrespective of the circumstances, and time is absolute. The clock keeps ticking at the same pace for everybody unforgivingly. Now, how are we going to remember all of this? And let me help you there a bit by referring to the classics.
And time waits for no one, and it won't wait for me. And time waits for no one.
So time waits for no one. Time is absolute. But Einstein challenged that concept. And he did that by coming up with a thought experiment. He imagined a situation in which lightning strikes in two trees simultaneously, the tree on the left and the tree on the right. Now, how do you know that happens simultaneously at the same time? If you are the observer C standing on the embankment, the lightning will hit the trees and the light will travel at the speed of light to you, and you will see it happening at the same time from your perspective. However, if you have the perspective of the observer D, who is positioned in the train, and then you need to assume that he's traveling at 4/5 the speed of light. So that's 240,000 kilometers per second, fast. For that person, he will see the lightning hit the tree B before he will see it hit the tree A. So if time is absolute and the speed of light is absolute, that can't be right. So something has got to give. And Einstein figured it is time that has got to be relative. So it depends on whether you are in motion compared to the object you're watching, whether or not you have the same time. So time is on your side. So, as far as I'm concerned, these are the only ways I can remember it, so you're going to be bored with this for quite a while. So he did this while working at the patent office, but are patents a contributing factor? Is Einstein the benchmark for, do you need his kind of intelligence to be able to get a patent? That would be very frightening, wouldn't it? If you were an inventor in 1905, walking through the door of the Swiss patent office and be confronted with somebody like Einstein as your examiner, and you would say to your examiner, you can never guess what I just figured out. And Einstein would look at you in a very friendly way and smile and say, try me. That would be a hard position for our inventor, but lucky for us and our inventors, the benchmark is the person skilled in the art. So it's not a professor of a technology, it's not a PhD candidate, it's the person skilled in the art, the vakman. And to be able to get a patent, he needs to make an inventive step. And something is inventive if it is not obvious, if it is not within reach for him. Niet voor de hand liggend in Dutch. So that benchmark, that hurdle to take is actually quite low. So that means you don't need the Einsteins of this world to work at the patent office. And the result of that was that Einstein came up with all these inventions because he was bored beyond belief as a patent examiner. Not a very good advertisement for the average patent office. So we can't claim that. Can we then say that he came up with these inventions because he thought he might be able to get a patent on them? Were they an incentive for him doing these inventions? There also the answer for patent law is a bit disappointing. The general rule is that we have a public domain, and that knowledge and ideas are free as the air to common use, as is a famous quote from a US Supreme Court decision. So knowledge and ideas cannot be patented, and we find that back in Article 52 of the European Patent Convention. Scientific theories, mathematical methods, those are not subjects that you can patent. What you can patent is the industrial application thereof. And the example is Einstein's famous formula E equals mc squared. That is unpatentable, but the application thereof, by building a nuclear power plant and using that energy, that is where patent law may kick in. But that is exactly what Einstein didn't do. So what is the added value of patents? The mantra in patent law is publish or perish. And the same is true for life in the academics. Either you publish or you will suffer. And in patent law, we have the same approach. If you want an exclusive right, you need to publish your invention. You need to put it in writing in a patent document. Some of you may recognize this as the patent for the Epilady device to remove hair. I can explain that for 10 minutes, but I won't for now. You need to put it in writing, and that will be published in a register where everybody can have a look at it. As an inventor, you may be inclined to say, well, I'm only going to publish so much, but not the entire thing. Why should I educate the competition? If you want to do that, you'll get punished. You need to disclose in an enabling way, meaning that third parties need to be able to completely make a working product while reading the patent. And if you fail to do that, your patent should be revoked or invalidated at some point. Patents are granted, or octrooien, that's the same thing, are granted for an exclusive period with a maximum of 20 years. Then you need to publish them. Why? Because we want these patents to be an inspiration for third parties to read it, to understand what it is you invented, and then build on that, not infringe on it. We all promise that as a society. We're law-abiding citizens. We will respect your patent, but we are entitled to get inspiration from it. For such a system to work, you need to know where a patent draws the line in the sand. What am I allowed to do and what am I not allowed to do? So where stops the private property of the patentee and begins the public domain? We run the risk, or I run the risk, that this may get much too abstract. So let's try to do another thought experiment. The Ministry of Silly Walks is probably well known, but what you should imagine is that Michael Palin is not applying for a subsidy, a government grant. Assume he's applying for a patent. And let's have a look at what happens there.
Good morning. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, but I'm afraid my walk has become rather sillier recently, and so it takes me rather long. Now then, what was it again?
Well, sir, I have a silly walk, and I'd like to obtain a government grant to help me develop it.
I see. May I see your silly walk?
Yes, certainly, yes.
That's it, is it?
Yes, that's it, yes.
Mm-hmm. It's not particularly silly, is it? I mean, the right leg isn't silly at all, and the left leg merely does a forward aerial half-turn every alternate step.
Yes, but I think with government backing, I could make it very silly.
Mr. Pewdie, the very real problem is one of money. I'm afraid that the Ministry of Silly is no longer getting the kind of support that it needs. You see, there's defence, social security, health, housing, education, silly walks. They're all supposed to be excellent. But last year, the government spent less on the Ministry of Silly Walks than it did on national defence. Now, we get £348 million a year, which is supposed to be spent on all our available products. Coffee?
Yes, please.
Now, what would that silly walk patent look like? The silly walk patent would give you a nice certificate, the octrooibewijs here, something you can put on the wall, but it would be the front page, so to say, of a document, the patent. And that patent will contain a description, drawings, and claims. Now, what do we mean by that? The description is the prior art of for that silly walk. The way people walked without necessarily trying to be silly, but if you stare long enough at the top line, it Looks quite silly to me at some point. Or look at the bottom line where you see John Cleese's silly walk. That's the prior art, it was there before. Now, if you want a patent, there needs to be a problem. There needs to be a silly walk problem. Because in patent law, we sort of use the problem-solution approach, so we need to figure out what the problem was, and if you then solve it, bingo, you get your patent. The problem is how to walk silly in a sustainable, energy-saving way. And that problem has been solved with the patent, because the solution is the right leg isn't silly at all. That certainly saves energy. And the left leg merely does a forward aerial half turn every alternate step. So this is a way to walk silly without getting too tired too quickly. If you read this as a third party, you might wonder, what is a forward aerial half turn? Therefore, the patent contains drawings or pictures here, so a third person can figure out, okay, it probably looks a bit like this. And then the third element of that patent is the claim. And the claim for this patent would read, a method for walking silly, characterized in that the right leg isn't silly at all, and the left leg merely does a forward aerial half turn every alternate step. And with that in hand, we need to figure out what is left for us, potential silly walkers, what we can do freely without infringing, and what is the private property of the silly walk patentee. Now, how are we going to solve that puzzle? Well, we can look in the law. That always helps at this faculty. And if we go to Article 69 of the European Patent Convention, we read that the protection shall be determined by the claims. The last slide on the screen. And that the description and the drawing shall be used to interpret the claims. So, the name of the game is the claim, as an American judge once said. So it's all about the claim. Now, if we read this claim, there is something of a problem with it, because if you read it, and if you were not present during Michael Palin's interview at the Patent Office, you might wonder, what is this all about? What is that forward aerial half turn? The problem with patents is that, and with claims in particular, they read like poetry. But they read like poetry written by engineers. And believe me, you don't want a poem sent to you by an engineer. Now, how can we make this a bit more practical? How would you, because if we talk about scope of protection, the question is, when can you infringe the silly walk patent? What do you need to do? Well, a potential victim, if you will, is a funny walk. And again, I want you to join me, and this time we'll look at the funny walk as John Cleese did it once.
I'll do the funny walk.
Now, would he be infringing on Michael Palin's patent? The answer is, and that's rare in law, it's a clear no. Because the claim says that the right leg isn't silly at all, and with John Cleese's walk, both legs were silly, the right leg as well as the left leg. And the left leg was silly not every alternate step, but every step. So this is an example where the claim tells you this cannot be an infringement. Now, let's try to make this a bit more exciting and do another thought experiment. That was Einstein's favorite pastime, so it should work for us as well. Let's assume there's a person B, and B does the opposite. He does the opposite in that he has read the claim and said, okay, if my right leg is not to be silly at all, I change legs, if you will. So with me, the left leg isn't silly at all, and the right leg merely does that half turn, etc. The moment we see this, we probably realize that we probably feel sorry for our poor patentee, Michael Palin. Because if we go back to what he did demonstrating his invention, You might say it's rather arbitrary. He was doing it with the right leg, or left leg, sorry, as opposed to the right leg, whatever. But he ended up with a patent because of his patent attorney, who apparently didn't do a very good job. But we want to do justice. Mere language, mere words won't hold us back. We're going to do justice here so that Michael Palin gets what he deserves. But at the same time, we need to apply the law. Now, does the law give us the room to help him? And it does. If you look at Article 69, it says the protection is determined by the claims. But at the bottom, you see that the description and the drawings are there to interpret the claims. So the claims are the line of demarcation, but they can be interpreted. Now, if you tell a lawyer that he can interpret, then all kinds of stuff may happen. And if you read it and think about it, you will say, well, the claim is phrased the way it is, but there is an inventive idea behind the words of the claim. And the claim should have read that not the right leg or the left leg, it should have read that a leg does a forward aerial half turn every alternate step. That is the inventive idea behind the words. Now, if we interpret the claim as this and then look at what B is doing, we realize he is in deep trouble, because whether he does it left or right or whatever, he falls under the scope of protection. So B will do a bit more than only that. He will start looking at the claim and think, okay, both legs will be silly. I won't do a forward aerial half turn, but a backward aerial half turn, and not every alternate step, but every step. And then the question we need to answer is, does B infringe? We've read Article 69, and you all know it by heart now. And then we need to go to another instrument which is there, which is called the Interpretation Protocol to Article 69. And at the end it says that we need to find a balance between a fair protection to the patentee and reasonable certainty for third parties. Now, what does that tell us? What is reasonable certainty for third parties? It is, in essence, what you see is what you get. I should be able to read that claim, and that language should make it clear to me where the scope of protection stops. If you take that perspective, it's also clear that the inventive idea behind the words of the claim cannot be the scope of protection. Nevertheless, that's what courts do. I think you should limit that to the inventive idea as expressed in the words of the claim. We also need to be fair to the patentee. But how fair do we need to be? Because fairness to the patentee sort of might put you on the track. We need to help this poor patentee who ended up with a patent attorney not doing his job, maybe. But at the same time, the patentee drafted the claim. This is what he claimed. Nobody did put a gun to his head and say, no, no, you can't do this, you have to do that. So these are his choices. So fairness to the patentee is a limited concept.
You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, well, you might find.
What might you find? You wanted something, but you didn't claim it. Still being fair to the patentee who didn't take the opportunity, we may say, and this is case law as well, disclosed but not claimed is disclaimed. Disclosed but not claimed is disclaimed. What does that mean in this particular case? The prior art, as mentioned in the description, contains elements of John Cleese's silly walk. So if the patent describes that prior art, fails to claim it as part of the claims, the answer should be to the patentee, we're only being fair to you since you didn't take this opportunity. You won't be able to smuggle that into your scope of protection. And the other rule would be that unclaimed obvious alternatives also can't be part of the scope of protection. And the example would be the left leg and the right leg being exchanged. It's obvious that both can come to the same result, and since you didn't claim that, you shouldn't be allowed to get protection. This is also being accepted in recent case law, but it took a while before we got there. I see Jan smiling and okay. Unclaimed, unknown alternatives. You can't really blame a patentee for the fact that he didn't claim that. And hypothetically, let's assume the state of the art is that right legs are physically unfit to be silly. If that is the state of the art, then you can say, okay, if it turns out later that they can, that can be part of your scope of protection. And that is where a doctrine of equivalence may fit in. The rules, as given by Article 69 and as given by the Interpretation Protocol, are in theory clear and they can be interpreted in a uniform way. But the problem is between theory and practice. Because in real life, there is a difference. And this gets a bit technical, but you've been reading, hearing about the European Patent Convention, and you are getting a European patent. But that might make you believe that this is one patent for all of Europe. That's not really the case. The European Patent Convention only allows you to get a patent by going to the European Patent Office. That saves a lot of, you don't need to go to all these countries. But once it is granted, we say it falls apart into a bundle of national patent rights. But that language of the bundle is misleading. If we look at Article 2 of the Convention, it says a European patent shall have the effect of a national patent, which is why we refer to it as a bundle of patents. But good lawyers always read the complete sentence, and then you read it is unless the Convention provides otherwise. And the Convention provides otherwise in Article 69 that you now all know by heart. So the enforcement of that European patent is done by national courts, and they all need to enforce it by applying the same set of rules, but they come up with different results and also different interpretations of what we've just been looking at. And what we lack is a Supreme Court in Europe that sort of can step in and correct what these national courts are doing. And the present situation means that you may lose a case in Germany and on the same facts, but with a different court and with a different tradition, may win in the UK or the other way around. So that is sort of the legal version of quantum mechanics. Now, what is that again? This is your classic example of an atom, a nucleus in the middle and electrons circling around it. And it's a relationship or sort of determined by cause and effect. So if you know where the electron is, people, not me, but people like Einstein, can do the math and figure out where that electron should be the next time. But this model is outdated already since Einstein's time. It's replaced by quantum mechanics. So this is not the way we perceive that it works. This is, meaning that the electron can be in the cloud at the top or in the cloud at the side or at the bottom. And we can only sort of calculate the chance that it will be somewhere. And the funny thing is also that although it will travel between these four clouds, it will never be in between these clouds. Well, that's a very interesting trick to do. Now, Einstein did not buy into that. And after he came up with his theories of relativity, etc., he has spent the remainder of his life, and in particular the period that he was in Princeton, New Jersey, where Robert Dijkgraaf is now presiding. He spent years and years and years trying to come up with a unified field theory that would have do away with quantum mechanics and would be able to come up with a more logical explanation, etc. But he failed. And nevertheless, he was the person of the century. So there's a lot to say for failure too. He failed, but his famous quote was, "God does not play dice." Now, how are we going to remember all of this? And I see nobody taking notes, so let me give you a small bridge to remember this. Okay, the music was supposed to be louder than this, but you got it, is what Mick Jagger says at the end. And this picture sort of is an example of what quantum mechanics does. Both Jagger and Richard are both at the stage as well as at the screen behind them, two places at the same time and not in between, so to say. And Bruce Springsteen is having the time of his life, as you can read in his autobiography. So this is the explanation of quantum mechanics. Let's go back to the law. The present situation we have is the legal version of quantum mechanics, where indeed, if you are a patentee and you want to know what the outcome will be, it's a bit like rolling the dice. And depending on where you end up in court, etc., the result will be different. That's not a nice outcome. So we've tried to solve that by coming up what is called the Unified Patent Court. So where Einstein did not succeed with a unified field theory, we as patent lawyers seem to be getting there by coming up with that Unified Patent Court. And this was an agreement reached in 2012. And if we would have that, if we have that, then patent law would certainly be more law because the outcome would be more fair and predictable. But are we getting this Unified Patent Court? And the answer is probably no, or certainly it remains to be seen. Because the Unified Patent Court requires the signatures of the 3 leading patent jurisdictions in Europe, and that includes the United Kingdom, Germany, and France. And as you will all appreciate, now that the United Kingdom has decided that they want out, they're not going to sign anything that says Europe. So that Unified Patent Court will be something we probably won't be getting. Well, you can't blame us for not trying. There have been 4 attempts to get there. One was in 1975 when we got the European Patent Convention, and this was supposed to be the extra. If you signed all the boxes for all the countries, you would get a community patent, but that never materialized, not enough signatures. In 1989, there was an agreement on a community patent, which again failed because not enough countries really supported it. That was an effort by Bolkestein at the time, as commissioner at the European Union. Then we had another attempt in 2007, a proposal on a community patent, and that one didn't fly either. To an extent also because patent lawyers did their best to keep the European Court of Justice out. Patent lawyers, being specialized, according to patent lawyers, think that the European Court in Luxembourg is not qualified enough to really handle patent cases. Since my chair is patent law as a specialization, officially I can't differ, but unofficially I do. Now, the 4th attempt was the Unified Patent Court. So we are in deep trouble.
Well, this could be the last time. This could be the last time. Maybe the last time. I don't know. Oh no!
There's been a lot of British videos, but you have to hand it to our colleagues from the other side of the pond that they do have a good sense of humor. So when it seems like the darkest hour, they tell us to keep the faith.
Always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the light side of life.
So cheer up, Brian. I once said that to a client when we lost the case. Fortunately for me, he had a good sense of humor. But it's easy to say cheer up, but we need to solve this one way or the other, and who's going to do that? Who will come to our rescue? And you need to look for a Superman kind of person with those kinds of qualities. And whether we like it or not, as patent lawyers in Europe, our Superman and women can be found in the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. They dress silly, so they should know their patent law. But at the same time, I'm not really qualified to say they dress silly standing here like this. Now, how did the European Court come to the rescue? You might wonder, what happened here? What happened is that the law changed, and what happened is that we have TRIPS. TRIPS stands for Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. And you have intellectual property rights, and you have trade-related aspects of these rights. And the TRIPS agreement that spells this out is part of the World Trade Organization mechanism, with 164 countries being members. And it's only the white spots on the map, where most of them is a situation of war and very poor living conditions, that are not a member of the World Trade Organization. And that World Trade Organization explains why China is today like the factory of the world. The World Trade Organization and that TRIPS agreement has been signed by both the European Union as an institution and the individual member states. And in a decision of 2007 and in other decisions before, the Court of Justice for the European Union said that it is the court that is qualified to interpret TRIPS. So they are the judge when it comes to what TRIPS means. At the same time, they said, since it's a dual authority, if you will, the member states also signed TRIPS, that they said although in theory they have the authority to interpret, in practice they can only step in if the community has somehow started legislation, like we have in trademarks and copyrights, but not in patent law, except for the biotech directive. But patent law in general is not legislated yet by the European Union. And because of that, in this decision of 2007, the answer was that TRIPS patent law is not European Union law, and therefore the Court of Justice cannot step in. Well, the world kept turning while we patent lawyers were chasing the unified patent, and without us realizing it, the Lisbon Treaty of the European Union, which revised the Maastricht Treaty signed here before, has a new article somewhere, 207. I never got that far in the treaty until I need it for today. And that provision now says that the common commercial policy, which is what the European Union can do, what its authority is, includes, and that is new, commercial aspects of intellectual property rights. Commercial aspects of intellectual property rights. Now, if you recall the title of TRIPS, Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights, you will appreciate that indeed TRIPS and these commercial aspects are one and the same. So in 2013, the Court of Justice in the Daiichi case, which is not very well recognized among patent lawyers, including myself so far, the court took another look at the situation and differed from what it did in the Merck decision. And why? Because we had the Lisbon revision in between. So in the Daiichi case, the court said, okay, TRIPS is about commercial aspects. Commercial aspects is the domain of the union now, contrary to before. So we no longer have the requirement that the union needs to have legislated before we can step in. So the fact that we don't have a patent directive is no longer critical. And therefore, TRIPS patent law is now European patent law. And the court did that. In that decision, they took Article 27, which is a different provision, but we also have Article 28, and Article 28 is, although you may not say so on its face, is about scope of protection. Article 28 says that a patent right should confer an exclusive right to make the product as patented or use the process as patented. So you need to make sure as a country that you give an exclusive right to make the product, and that is the product as claimed. And this is a bit now it gets a bit technical, but in copyright we had the phenomenon that we thought that the concept of a work was not European law because it was mentioned in the directives but not really defined. And the court said there, never mind, that needs to be interpreted in a uniform way, and we will do so. And all the copyright lawyers were in shock that the European Union Court now was the ultimate court in copyright. And it's my interpretation of what you read here that this will mean that the European Court of Justice now is, whether we like it or not, the court that can interfere if it comes to determining scope of protection. And for patent lawyers and judges in the Netherlands, that's something that we need to get adjusted to, that we may have to refer questions to the ECJ to determine what the patented product is and whether the rules of Article 69 and the interpretation protocol are interpreted correctly. So we finally are getting to that unified European patent law, not necessarily with the Unified Patent Court, but in the meantime, without us realizing, the European Court of Justice simply did its work, and as a result, we're getting to what we as patent lawyers should think of as the promised land. Now, some of my, and that is possible, some of my somewhat older colleagues may rebel and may not like this, and a lot of patent law diehards may not like this as well, because we patent lawyers like to think that we are so special. We like to think of ourselves as the Einsteins of the legal community. If we're realistic, we only need to be the average lawyer and the average person skilled in the art to do the patent law as we do it. So we're getting to the promised land, and my position is that we should enjoy that and that we should believe in the route that the European Court is taking, and that we should have the faith to stand on the ground of the promised land. So we're finally getting into the promised land with a little bit of help of the boss that should be possible. So this is the end of the journey we took from Einstein's relativity to a unified patent law. We might be getting there even though we didn't realize it. And then on the route to get there, we have been bridging some gaps between science, patents, and rock and roll. And that is always a good thing as far as I'm concerned. So it's time to say a few thank yous. And my first thank you certainly goes to Jan Brinkhoff, who was my predecessor in Utrecht. And we've had the privilege to teach together for 2 or 3 years. Jan may have a different perspective on it, but I enjoyed every minute of it. And Jan really switched the light on in patent law as far as I'm concerned. I also have a few words of thank you for making it possible for me to follow all these crazy hobbies, to my colleagues at Boek 9 and to my colleagues at Van Toe, the law firm I'm with in Utrecht. And in particular, a special word of thanks to Suzanne, with whom I started that firm in 2004. And Suzanne, the moment you start taking me seriously, I will leave. That's a promise. Another word of thanks for my colleagues here at the University of the IPKM Institute, Anselm, Kees, Anke, Anna, and Meijer. You've made me feel welcome right from the start. And I love the ambitious spirit that we have here in Maastricht with an international outlook on law. And it's an impressive teaching program. I come from outside in that regard, and an impressive PhD program. And Anselm, you in particular, can be very proud of what you've made happen here in Maastricht on IP. You started with nothing, and you certainly created something. To the IPKM students, the program we run is visited by students from all over the world, China, Brazil, Indonesia, some from the Netherlands, but other European countries as well. And I find it a very big privilege to be able to teach to you. And I'm very impressed and humbled by the fact that you travel from wherever you are living to go live here in Maastricht for a year and invest in your future. And we, as the IPKM team, certainly hope that we can make a difference and make sure that your studies here in Maastricht are worth their while and will have a lasting impact on your careers. I've worked abroad at two occasions, and that certainly had a lasting impact on me. Good. My family, Gus and Bob. Your old man always told you that you can do and should do what your heart tells you to. That is still true, and both your mother and I are very proud of who you are and what you have become. But, having said that, and I have the microphone, having said that, you guys are 23 and 25 by now. Einstein had his miracle year at the age of 20. So your mother and I are looking forward to be happily surprised in the near future. But, like I said, no pressure. Annette, we learned since a week that there is a concept called provocative coaching. And we know for quite a while that you are very good at it. At the last occasion in Utrecht in 2007, I surprised you by saying that you've been coaching my career in academics with 2 iron questions. Do you think anybody will read this? And the second question is, what does it pay? And the answer to both questions was quite depressing. You were surprised, but lucky for me, all your friends recognized you in that summary. Today, I want to close on a more positive note by paraphrasing Miami Steve. I gave you my heart and you loved me forever. You picked up the pieces when I stumbled and fell. And believe me, there have been a lot of pieces to pick up on numerous occasions. Thank you. Ik heb gezegd.
Wow, I was almost wondering whether I should now walk here in a very silly fashion, but since you walked back so speedily, I thought I could resist that. Ladies and gentlemen, you have come here in great numbers to listen to Dick. So I very much thank you for coming and being here. And I hope you have enjoyed Dick's inaugural lecture. I certainly did. Dick, when you came here first, it was, I think, 2009, 2010, when we started the IPKM program, I was very keen to attract the hotshot from Utrecht University to come and teach in the program. And you have been very instrumental in moving the program forward to where it is now. In teaching, in discussing ways forward, and also at a certain point in time, you responded very positively to the idea that we should do something about a UPC litigation certificate course. Now, Brexit has thrown a spanner in the wheels, but we have now learned that this doesn't matter. Brexit or no Brexit, we will get there. Meanwhile, I still have to say that I'm very happy that you made the decision to join us here in the team at Maastricht to develop the IPKM program further, whichever way, Brexit or no Brexit. And what has also been striking in this regard is the speed with which you have connected to colleagues in the faculty, colleagues dealing with other disciplines than intellectual property law. And I think that is very much the way forward for our own discipline. Very many ways intellectual property lawyers, and especially patent lawyers, dare I say, are caught in a little cocoon. And what we are continuously trying to do here at Maastricht University is to break out of that cocoon and look elsewhere for solutions. Solutions also that we try to find with our young students. And it is my privilege then also to welcome you to Maastricht University and to our Faculty of Law. And we very much look forward to a very productive cooperation in future. With that said, I can now close this ceremony and invite your family and your friends, new colleagues, old colleagues, everyone to the rector for the reception where they can congratulate you.